thank you all again for being here and successfully making the jump through Zoom. So congrats on that. Our next speaker is Jay Galea from Headset Sports. He has been a friend of Angel City for the past year or so, and we're excited to work with him in the future to continue to give our athletes the best mental training they can. I'll let Jay speak more about Headset, but I stole this line from their website. I think it's brilliant. I'm going to read it here. It says, focused on giving athletes, coaches, and teams an opportunity to reach their truest potential by strengthening the most controllable element in sport, the mind, which is profound. And I've never thought of it that way. So Jay, take it away, please.
Thank you for that intro. So Camille and Clayton, thank you again for letting me have dinner with your family of amazing people. And I'm excited to talk with all of you guys today about what Headset Sports does and what I do. I and my colleague Peter, Dr. Peter Papadopoulos, we work as sports psychologists. We've had the opportunity to work with athletes, teams, and coaches and all of the major sports that you can even imagine. And what we basically came up with a few years ago was the idea of how can we help more athletes on their own time? And more importantly, how can we help athletes empower themselves? And in doing such, how can this now help coaches and teams as a whole? And it was looking at those three aspects: helping the athlete, helping the coach, and helping the team as a whole, is what is the concept of Headset Sports. So Headset Sports is something that you'll all get a chance to have access with. If you haven't had the chance to check us out, go to our website, www.headsetsports.com, and you'll see a little bit about us. But in essence, what we do is we help athletes empower themselves. And what we do is we create a customized account, a customized program for every single athlete on a team based on how their season may be progressing. So one day things could be going really well. All of a sudden something doesn't go so well, like maybe get injured, get dropped down to the second line, whatever it may be. That person starts to change. And with that, their needs change. So how can we help them with that? So a little bit about us. What we do is we look at 5 different categories. And it's the 5 categories that Peter and I felt were the secret ingredients to helping athletes be their best. And those ingredients basically are this. It's emotional awareness. You know, I feel myself getting tight. I feel myself getting overly nervous and it doesn't feel good. Or I think I'm going to lose it and I don't know what to do with it. The next is emotional regulation. I'm having these emotions. How do I calm myself down and refocus? How do I pick myself back up and not let the nervousness overtake me? And once again, how do I get refocused? The third thing that we look at is all around motivation. Motivation to compete, motivation to be the best that I can be. What's my motivation all about? From there, we look at a little something called self-confidence. Do I feel I can be as good as I hope to be, want to be, dream to be? And if not, what can we as coaches, what can we do to help raise that self-confidence? And the last thing that we look at is something that's probably been one of the most catchphrase terms in professional and elite amateur sports for the past 3 to 4 years now, and it's the term resiliency. How can we help these athletes develop more resiliency skills? Well, what we're able to do is give each athlete something that they can work on each week to help develop the skill set that might be most in need of attention. So any of those 5 skill sets that I listed out for you there, how can we help them with whatever it is might be the lowest common element in need of help, shall we say. From there, where it helps coaches is we can't tell you exactly what each athlete is talking about and what they're sharing because we're 100% confidential for every athlete. But what we can do is we can help coaches see the different pillars, the different categories that their athletes are working on. So for example, We can send you guys a report that lets you see the overview of your locker room, of your team. We can show you what the percentage breakdown is of the number of athletes, what they're working on. And from there, we can also list out for you what each athlete is working on at that present time. So, for example, again, if you had a group of athletes that you knew on any given week or a specific week are working on self-confidence issues, how might you as a coach be a little bit more helpful? Maybe you turn around and you check in with those athletes a little bit more. Maybe you turn around and make sure in your mind to really point out something that he or she did really well at practice or in the training sessions, to really make sure that you're hitting that special button that that athlete needs. And I'll tell you, a lot of young athletes will hide that element the most. And what I mean by that is, in my practice and working with athletes and coaches, self-confidence is something that always gets grazed over. You know, athletes would rather talk about, you know, things like their all-around form, their all-around execution, maybe their fitness. Very rare are you going to get a young athlete that will come right on out and say, I'm not feeling confident. And they'll hide behind things like, you know, I just got to get my speed up. I just got to get my shot a little bit better. I just got to work on my technique. And a lot of times when we're focusing on form, we can sometimes miss a really important statement that's being made in a silent way. And that could be, coach, I just don't know how to tell you I'm not feeling confident. And especially if you're working with really good athletes that are serious about their sport, it's hard to say to a coach, I'm not feeling confident. Has anybody dealt with confidence issues with their athletes? Feel free to mute yourself and blurt it on out.
Yeah, I definitely have. I've had an athlete who was especially afraid of getting hit by the goal ball, and I had to deal with that one season, and that was definitely a growth experience for both of us, learning how to coach that, and also just for him practicing and getting better.
So what is your name? Okay, I only use goal ball. Todd, Josh. Thank you for sharing, buddy. I really appreciate this. So, if you don't mind, I want to throw you under the bus a little bit here. And seeing you have judo behind you, you should be okay with this. Hopefully, you don't flip me under as well. I guess my question would be, buddy, when you had that issue come up, how did you try to address it?
The biggest thing I tried to do was to change his mindset. So I preached to him that we're not getting hit by the ball, we're diving on top of the ball. So you're attacking the ball. So it was just trying to flip between the association of the ball's hitting me, it's bringing pain, versus I'm jumping on it and I'm controlling it, I'm attacking the ball. And that did seem to help.
So that's brilliant what you're doing. Like, absolutely brilliant. God, I wish I had a coach like you when I was younger, with the fears that I was dealing with. And to share with all of you, growing up, my sport was hockey, and I was a goalie. And in my sport, when confidence started to go out the window, we would refer to things such as, you know, today I see the hockey puck and it's the size of a beach ball. And on my worst day, it's the size of a pea. And I couldn't put myself in that position. But what you're doing, which is so fantastic, is you're finding ways to empower that athlete and to really, you know, excuse the pun, but flip the situation around and embed control for that athlete. Like, you're not going to sit there and be a victim of the moment and let this thing hit you. You're going to, as you said, jump on it. That's part of the underlying basis of what we try to do with Headset. And it's to say that rather than just doing the talk therapy, which is very, very important and you can't get away from it, it's to say, rather than telling you, let's jump on the ball, how about we give you things that can empower you as an athlete to work on? So if the athlete is in a situation where we say we need to lose weight, get in better shape, stronger, whatever it may be, there's things they can go do and empower themselves, go to the gym, work with a trainer. How do you do that mentally and emotionally? And if they don't have a great coach like you who could spin that scenario around. They're going to focus on little things that might make them feel good because they worked hard at the gym that day, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to transfer over to what they feel here. And if they don't feel it here, we're not going to get the best out of them. You know, how did it end up going, Josh, with that kid?
It did get better by season's end. And part of it was just the repetition, honestly. I think trying to switch his mindset and his focus on attack rather than the passive helped. But at the end of the day, I think it was just taking more hits. And when you're playing in a fast-paced game, honestly, sometimes that little bit of loss of control where I can't control how fast the ball is coming, but I know my teammates are coming on me, and you take those couple hard hits and you start to get settled in. So it also just got better just with time, and I think the maturity of the season weighed on him. So it did get better.
I think by contextualizing it the way you did, not only did it give that athlete a different framework, a different mindset to look at the situation, but in doing such, you allowed that athlete to, in my opinion, create those mental stats of me looking at it different is improving. So one of the things that is important too, guys, is when you are working with your athletes on anything on that mental, emotional side, you want to be able to indicate some sort of statistics for an athlete. And what I mean by that is we all know that people learn one of three different ways or a combo. And there are people who would argue that the opposite of that. But in reality, we really know that people learn by hearing things, seeing things, and testing it out. So audio, visual, kinesthetic. And for many young kids today who are combo learners, it's a combination. But at the end of the day, if you can show them either video context or paper statistic context, hey, look, ever since we tried to go at it and be more aggressive like Josh is sharing, your stats have improved. Your speed has improved. Your engagement has improved. However the analytics might be for your teams, your sports, showing them that your efforts and your change of mind are now creating improvement in your game, it's huge. It's huge. Because if you don't have those and you're working with serious athletes, at times you can come across as being like mom or dad. You did great. You're doing awesome. And if you guys are working with serious athletes, and I know you are, that's only going to go so far.
I have a question that
Yeah.
Some other people might be thinking about. So I know obviously one of the ways you train physically is repetition, and you do it over and over. Training mentally, from the conversations I've had with other coaches and other sports psychologists, is you introduce stress. But I'm always interested to hear from professionals, what are some of the guidelines, or how do you monitor, right? Like, so for example, to practice your mindset, you purposely introduce stress so that they can practice dealing with the stress. So one of the things I would always do is I would do our conditioning, some practices, and then we'd have a scrimmage at the end. So you're tired and now you have to perform. But what are your suggestions for how do you gauge the limits of what is too much stress introduced, what's not enough stress to help them train their mind? What's the appropriate amount?
It's a fantastic question. I mean, the question you're asking is professional and elite level, just so you know. The stuff that you're hinting upon reminds me of some of the work that I've had the opportunity to be around with the Navy SEALs. And they do everything with stress. Everything is all about how can you react in the moment. When you're developing an environment for stress, one of the things that you really want to be focused on as a coach or even as an instructor is that your lesson plan, what you need them to do is 100% clear. So what I mean by that is there are too many people, too many coaches that I've seen and worked with in the past that they know what they want the athlete or the team to do. And they know that it's important to introduce that stress element, but they introduce the stress element too quickly in a way where the team, the athlete has not had truly ample amount of time to work on that skill or response set. So what ends up happening is when they do that stress inoculation, you're just heightening more drama. You're just heightening more chaos. So in most sports, you might be able to implement 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 stress inducers. Once you know that everyone has that skill set to be able to respond to the stress inoculation, that's when you go full out, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. So get the basics down first, so they know what they have to do in a perfect situation, right? And then you introduce the stress of how do you practice in a not perfect situation.
But you're 100% A+ answer. But here's some things that you can do to make sure you're at that plateau of everyone gets it, everyone understands it, right? I don't know if you implement video sessions or any of that kind of stuff into what you do, but I would make sure that every single athlete, whether it's during a training session or a video session, you're hitting them with, hey, you, in this situation, how have we all agreed that we're going to respond? So, for example, one of the things that I discuss during coaching symposiums is I talk about how we as coaches working with teams often are the same person that takes a group of kids, a group of athletes, and you walk through a gallery together. And you're standing in front of a painting. And we all look and we nod our head and we go, wow, yeah, amazing, cool, wow. But do we take the time to really ask, what is it that you're wowing over? Is it the color? Is it the shape? Is it the design? Is it, the whole combination, how it makes you feel? What are you wowing over? And when you find out what everyone's wow is, then you can start addressing, okay, we all have different things that we see and focus in on this situation. But as a group, can we agree that it's the color that really drew us? It's the feeling that really brought us to this painting. That's the same thing as a coach saying, okay, listen, when stress happens, when they come in to attack us, we're going to look at option 1, option 2, and then option 3 in this order. Because if we don't, and we ask them to describe the situation, one person is going to talk about color, one person is going to talk about design, one person is going to talk about, did you see the picture beside it? So again, that's a scenario where unless we all know how to properly respond and agree that this is how we're going to respond, inducing stress inoculation too soon can cause a tither, right? So like in my sport, for example, the sport of hockey, what we would do is we would try to put stress in by putting 1 attacker in. How are you going to respond? 2nd attacker in. How are you going to respond? 3, then 4. And then from there, when they get it, you get to a point where you can just start practicing with, okay, we're just starting with 3 attackers right now. And that's going to be our standard. Now our standard is we start practice with 3 attackers, because you should all know by now what we're doing. And if not, let's start asking questions. Does that make sense, Josh? Or
no, for sure. I think that goes with having a plan, but I think that makes a lot of sense.
Great question, by the way. Great question. Anybody else have questions with maybe introducing stress or maybe working with self-confidence with young athletes? So I have a question here. Yes.
Yeah. So that's one topic I find very interesting, that when dealing with disabled athletes, as for me with tennis, I deal with individuals, and my biggest feel that I had to overcome is trying to get my athletes' confidence to show their emotion, because sometimes I find athletes that have no confidence of showing their emotion out there as an athlete. And so therefore I feel as a coach, I see them bottled up. I see them not being themselves. And as of coaching and as sports, I feel that has a lot of result into their performance. And I see a correlation with that because I deal a lot with disabled athletes that are younger of age, kids. And so that's my big thing is I find that they don't have the confidence within to show their emotion. And it can be positive or negative. It's either way. So that's where I really hone in on what's going on off the court, so to speak, where I'll just kind of gradually, very subtly So in time, I can get a full picture of who they are as an individual, and then I can go approach of how I'm gonna choose my approach of getting them to show getting them that inner confidence that they need as being an athlete, to be an athlete, to perform at the highest level. And so I find that sometimes challenging. Is there anything that
Yep, I've got. What is your name?
Anthony? I do wheelchair tennis.
Hi, Anthony. I'm Jason.
Hey, Jason.
Anthony, fantastic question. So let me give you a cookie to use, okay? And you can use this with all ages and all levels. In the business world, we do a lot of assessments with elite managers, executives, blah, blah, blah. And one of the most powerful tools that you can use is something called a 360. And a 360 is I get all the kids together on your team, all the coaches that you work with, and we give feedback on you, Anthony. And we talk about how you lead, how you coach, the type of person you are, a whole bunch of different categories, right? And then we share it. And when we share it in a report, in a document, and you're going to look at it and you're going to go, oh my God, people think I'm funny. People think I'm easygoing. I never thought that. I thought people thought I was mean and tough and strong and whatever. And now you start getting feedback back on how people see you. Well, one of the things that you can do that's so powerful as a coach, and you can treat it like a little raindrop of insight with these kids, is to be able to say to this kid, do you know how smart you are? Do you know how funny you are? Do you know how resilient you are? Like, I just need you to know, Mikey, Susan, Jimmy, Billy, Fred, whoever it may be. And you give them little insights where you're talking to them one-on-one while you're coaching, after practice, whatever it may be, when you have that real emotional moment, that your guard is down moment, and you let them know some of the things that they do great, and some of the things that you love about them. So if you're to go to the hardest person that you could see is the one that you feel at any moment could end up having an emotional breakdown, but instead just holds it inside, and you're worried about them blowing on up. You might say something like, you know how strong you are? Like, I got to let you know, in coaching you, you're so emotionally strong, it's unbelievable, because I never get to see when you're upset. And I need you to know that everybody trusts you so much that we all know that you're never going to say something bad. We know that you're never going to act out of hand. So we just need to know that we trust you. So if you're ever having a moment, buddy, where you're feeling frustrated or upset, it's totally okay if you say something, because we trust you. And all of a sudden now, they feel they've got a little bit more room to spread their wings. Where in reality, they feel that everyone likes it when they're like this, and they're all bundled up. So if you can give your athletes just a little bit of insight on things that they might not even know that you value, things that are totally okay for them to share, things that are amazing about their characteristics, personality, they might not even know that those personality traits or characteristic traits are even of value. They might think, you know what, being able to be loosey-goosey might make my coach think that I'm not focused, or I don't take it seriously, or you know, I'm not representing the team well if I take things easy. And if you can let them know that that's a strength that they have, oh, now you're creating a monster. You're creating a beast right now, because now that inner is going to be able to come out because you gave them permission to let it out. Does that make sense, Anthony?
Oh, yes, most definitely. And that's some of the different ways I can relate to some of the suggestions you're making. But really, I find that always challenging for me as a coach, and but challenging in a good way, because it helps me let me for myself learn more as it's each day as I go on the court teaching or even performing. It helps me as an individual as well. So thanks.
No problem. And you know, buddy, you can do this very nonchalant. Like, it doesn't have to be a sit down and we have to have coffee, whatever. It could be a little shoulder punch and, hey, I just need you to know, do you know how emotionally tough you are? Do you know how funny you are? And walk away. And all of a sudden you start opening their minds to whenever you feel you might want to have that deeper conversation with them. And now they're going to be engaged with you. Like they're going to be like, tell me more, coach. So it doesn't have to be a real sit down kind of thing. It's just, once again, little raindrops of insight. So good luck with things. Good luck. If I can do anything to help, please let me know, guys. You can always get my contact information with any of your athletes, any of your teams, through either Camille or Clayton. I love what you guys are doing, and as part of Headset, we're just so honored and happy to be a part of all the things that you guys are doing. So this is fun for us.
Thanks so much,
Camille,
Jay.
Camille, I want to make sure I'm respecting time here.
Yeah, we do have a couple more minutes if anyone had a final question they wanted to put out there before Jay drops off. Don't be shy.
Awesome. I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, good luck, everyone. Thank you again for today, Camille.
Thanks so much. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Angel City focuses on the summer Paralympic sports mainly, but we also are beginning to dabble more into some of the recreational sports. Cheerleading has been big for us this year, and we also started a wheelchair football team, which is, it's not a new sport, but it's a revived sport, and our head coach is one of the founders of the game. So if that sounds interesting to you, be sure to rename yourself to wheelchair football. Our coach is here.
Hey, and Camille.
Yes, Josh. Or sorry, Bart.
All right. I've been called Josh before. I don't like that you have Kansas City's picture up on here.
You know, I knew you were going to say that, but we don't have any team photos. So it was that or one of the Move United photos where they're holding the football wrong.
Yeah, no, that one's better than the Move United ones, but we're going to have to get the picture version.
I know. All right.
Bart,
I'm just going to, sorry, go ahead, Clayton.
I was just say, Bart, let us know when you want us to send a photographer out to take some good shots of you guys practicing.
Yeah, well, the trick is being able to practice first, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Believe me, we're anxious. We're like ready to go.
I know.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to hand it off to Josh Lucas. He is the Recreation Programs Manager of Wayfinder Family Services and the Director of Camp Bloomfield. Josh is a super experienced adaptive sports coach, and he has his master's in adaptive physical activity. He was super instrumental in our ability to add visually impaired sports to the Angel City Games and Angel City Sports in general, and he is our goalball director. So this is a intro to disability sport, and Josh, take it away.
Thank you. Feel free at any time, guys, to interrupt. And Camille, if you can monitor the chat and just throw it, because when I go full screen, all I see is my presentation. So feel free to interrupt, but there's a couple things I really want to touch on that are big. So I know everyone in here is interested in sport and has a sport background, but not everyone may be aware or necessarily know about adapted sports. So like Camille said, we'll start with, who am I? My name is Josh Lucas. I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I'm a Steelers guy, Bart. I hope that's okay. I bleed black and gold, but I, like most of the people who may be in here, I got interested in disability sport just through being a sports person. I grew up playing football and ran track and field. And then in college, I discovered disability sport and I fell in love with it. I had to take one class into adapted. And I had a client who was a 60-year-old man with an intellectual disability, and we had to exercise together, and I fell in love. And then through that, the professor got me into goalball as a club activity, and the rest is history. I said, I love this. I want to study this. So I took my sports education and turned it into adapted sports. But I want to cover some of the topics. I'm going to try and go through this fairly quickly because some of you may know, but also cover it for those who might not. So the history of adapted sports is a very important one. Obviously, the number of people with disabilities is growing every day, especially as medical care gets better. People are surviving with disabilities way, way differently than when adapted sports started. So It dates all the way back to the 1800s. A lot of it started with deaf sports. For those of you who don't know, there are the Deaf Olympics, which are separate from the Paralympics. Right now, the deaf community doesn't feel necessarily that they fit into the Paralympic model. So it started with deaf sports way back into the 1800s. And really cool, in 1907, there was the first ever track meet between the blind, and they did it via telegraph. So we're in COVID, we're in a world of Zoom. One of the things we talked about with Angel City Virtual Games is, could we maybe do something and do that? It's funny because that's how it started, is they started and then they telegraphed each other the times, and they did it totally over telegraph. So all the way back to the 1800s. Sir Ludwig Gutmann was a neurologist at the Stoke Mandeville Hospital in England, and he is the father of the Paralympics. So after World War II, obviously the disability population was greatly increased, and a lot of them were spinal cord injuries or amputees. But what they learned is the life expectancy for somebody with a spinal cord injury was less than 2 years, because these people were put on bed rest. They didn't know what to do with them. And, you know, bed sores, infections, all those kind of things, it took a toll on people. So Gutmann saw that, and he wanted people to be able to return to society. So he introduced physical activity to these spinal cord injury patients, and he also made it mandatory. So each patient had to find something to do, whether it was exercising, they did wheelchair polo, they did wheelchair basketball, and yes, archery, which started the Stoke Mandeville Games. So the Stoke Mandeville Games are really the first Paralympics. They opened as the same day as the Olympics in 1948. And it was 16 athletes who participated in archery. So if you're an archery instructor, archery fan, you guys are the first. You started, archery was the big one. And this was the first time in 1952, they added the Dutch, and then it became international. It moved to Rome in 1960, and again, occurred right before the Olympics. And those are known as the true first Paralympics. Does anyone know why it's called the Paralympics? You can unmute yourself. Does anyone know? The para stands for parallel. So they are designed to be parallel to the Olympics. It's the Paralympics. And it was truly the first, big games, like I said, right before Rome. And it really showed that this is something that people with disabilities need. So in 1964, the International Sport Organization for the Disabled, which was ISOD, they were to focus on the few disabilities that were, they felt easiest to adapt sports at the time, which were cerebral palsy, blind, amputee, and spinal cord injury. And then the first Paralympics with blind and amputee joined in Toronto in 1976. So the Paralympic logo is those three disability communities coming together. In 1982, the ICC, they started for World Disability Sports, included cerebral palsy, the International Blind Sports Association, the Stoke Mandeville Wheelchair Sports Federation, and of course, the International Sports Organization for the Disabled. Then they added 2 more committees, lots of letters. And so they had their meetings in the Netherlands in 1987, and they drafted the constitution for the new committee, which is the International Paralympic Committee, which was founded in 1989. I won't tell you how old I am, but that was a big year, and it officially took over after 1992, the Olympics in Barcelona, and it moved over. And as many of you know, now it is now the International Olympic and Paralympic. So that is huge for people with disabilities. They now are right on par with the Olympic athletes, which is exactly what we want. So the goal of the International Paralympic Committee is to govern international disability sports. Each country, just like the Olympic Committee, has representation, athletes have representation, and it focuses on the big pictures, funding. A big thing that's different, obviously, with the Paralympics compared to the Olympics is classification. So the IPC also helps with classification to level the playing field and make sure everything is perfect with that. It's a very complex system. And again, working with the International Olympic Committee. So we'll keep scrolling through. Like I said, some of the history I want to, you guys can read this, but I want to get through, make sure I can fit my presentation in. So again, the CISS, they withdrew in 1995. They didn't feel it was completely for them. That's why they branched off. They do the Deaf Olympics now. But 1996 in Atlanta was huge. That was the first time that they used the same venues as the Olympics. So many of you know the Paralympic model now is wherever the Olympics happen, the Paralympics happen a few weeks later. Basically, all they do is they take the same athlete villages, they take the same venues, stadiums, everything. They make sure it's adapted for wheelchairs, for blind, everything, and then they're ready to go. So they take off that time, make sure everything is adapted, and then they're ready for the Paralympics to start. So there you go, Paralympics 2 weeks after the Olympics. And in 2012, the Olympics allowed Oscar Pistorius to compete. That was a big, big point. There was controversy over that for several reasons. Does anyone have an idea of why that might have been controversial for Oscar Pistorius? For those of you who may not know, he is a double amputee. He was known as the Blade Runner from South Africa, double leg amputee who ran on both of his running blades. Does anyone know why that might have been controversial?
Yeah, Josh, it's Deb.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can hear me. Because I think they felt that the blades gave him an advantage, because if I remember, they were made out of carbon and they were quite advanced, and they felt that that would give him an advantage over the quote unquote non-challenged athletes.
Correct. That was definitely one of them. So there was two forms of why they thought this was controversial. That is correct. So Deb said, because he's a double amputee and he was using carbon legs, people thought, well, oh, those carbon legs are going to make him faster, which is interesting because if he was a one-leg amputee, nobody would have thought that, because they'd say he can only run as fast as his quote unquote normal leg will allow him, right? But because he was a double blade amputee, they said, oh, well, that makes him faster, which is not true. Second is, it was also controversial with some Paralympians because their thought, and this is the interesting thing, is why would you need to go to the Olympics? The Paralympics are the elite level of disability sport. So winning a gold medal in the Paralympics should be just as much an achievement as going to the Olympics. So why did he feel he needed to go to the Olympics? So it was also just an interesting thing to think about in that aspect as part of the Paralympics are about, again, parallel to the Olympics. We're talking elite level, and this is the competition. So why did you feel a need that you even needed to qualify and go?
Hey, Josh.
Yes.
Hi, this is Rich. Hey, just so you know, or everyone realizes that Blake Leeper is a bilateral amputee as well. And unfortunately, the Court for Arbitration of Sport just found that his blades are an advantage. So he is banned from participating in the Olympic Games.
Interesting. I will have to read up on that. Again, early on, it was just, again, the argument was because it's a double leg, right? If he had one leg, they would say he could only run as fast as that leg allows. With the double legs, they say they do the energy feedback surveys or research, and they look at, does this give them an advantage? So that's very interesting. Thank you.
I also have a collection of a lot of the research, and the function of the prosthetics have been broken down of all the different aspects of the actual function of the prosthetics during the sport activity. There are some aspects that are considered an advantage to the athlete, and there are other aspects that are a disadvantage. For example, in the long jump and triple jump, it is a disadvantage in the approach, but an advantage in the takeoff.
Got it. That is very interesting. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. I would love to see more about that. Actually, I'll talk to you after. But so recap for everyone. There's a lot of different organizations that govern different disabilities, and they make up the IPC, which oversees all of them. Okay, and then we have deaf and hard of hearing on the outside, kind of looking in. There's an important one off to the right, and this is what we're going to get into next, is intellectual disability. Okay, so in the Paralympics, there is intellectual disability. So that brings me to next. how many people, go ahead, I'm gonna open the chat so I can see it too. How many people are familiar with the difference between the Special Olympics and the Paralympics? Go ahead and type in the chat if you know what is the difference. Or David, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi everyone, David here, golf division. From what I understand, Special Olympics is cognitive, disabilities, or challenged with some sort of Down syndrome, or your brain is not quite making decisions the way an able-bodied person could, and Paralympics is some sort of physical difference that you're living with. That's more of it now.
Yes. So Special Olympics, just like David said, is intellectual disability, formerly known as mental retardation. We don't use that term anymore. Intellectual disability is the proper term. And it is for athletes with an intellectual disability. Now, in smaller communities, when we talk about opportunity, there is some overlap. So for example, I used to work at my college in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour north of Pittsburgh. And we had a group of community athletes who were blind or visually impaired. Talking to some of those parents, they were taking their child who was just blind and visually impaired and had a slight developmental delay and was participating in Special Olympics bowling, okay? But that wasn't necessarily the most appropriate. So there is some overlap, especially when some athletes do have multiple disabilities. But the biggest thing is, yes, Paralympics is physical disabilities. Special Olympics is intellectual disabilities. But like I said on the prior slide, there is a classification in the Paralympics for intellectual disabilities. But as Randy just said in the chat, one of the big things that is different is Paralympics is elite competition. Special Olympics also has elite competition, but they run it differently. Everybody, their classification is different, and their mindset about everybody wins in the Special Olympics. That is their model, which again is different. It's great. I love the Special Olympics, but it's a complete different. In the Paralympics, you have gold, silver, bronze. That's it. So we'll keep moving. I got to move the chat out of the way. So it was started by Eunice Kennedy Shriver. That is how she got the name Special Olympics. Obviously, it's because she was a Kennedy. There was some weight being pulled. Nobody else has the name Olympics or Paralympics. That is special to the Special Olympics. And, they started in the 60s, held in Chicago, the first one. And then the International Olympic Committee actually endorses and does recognize the Special Olympics. So the three major distinctions are athletes, the criteria, and the organizational structure is the big difference. So here's a comparison I have. We can go over some of these. I don't want to spend too much time, but the Special Olympics, again, athletes with intellectual or cognitive delay. Paralympics is physical disabilities. They must meet standards for their intellectual disability. There's no qualifying standards in the Special Olympics. Everyone can participate, okay? But for the Paralympics, you have to qualify. So just like my friends on the goalball team right now, they had to qualify. They had to win an international tournament to qualify to go to Tokyo next year. Paralympics is elite sport performance. Special Olympics does get elite. There's Special Olympics all the way up to the Special Olympic World Championships. I think they were actually in LA a few years ago. And like I said, the other big thing is that the classification is different. So they must have a certain number of hours practicing in the sport to qualify, but practice, again, does not dictate skill. But in the Paralympics, top 3 medal, you have to qualify the best of the best. Again, Special Olympics is run out of Washington, D.C. They do have a governing board of directors, and it is year-round. Several different programs, and they do 30 Olympic-type sports. The Paralympics, 165 member nations, represented by their national Paralympic committees. So, do the Paralympics serve athletes with intellectual disabilities? Yes, there is a classification. It was actually reintroduced. It was a crazy story. So for those of you who may not know, there was a big cheating scandal in the Paralympics intellectual classification. There was a team from Spain who pretended to have intellectual disabilities. They found out it was a reporter. I don't know how this guy, one, why he would do it. I don't think any of us could ever say why he would do it, but two, how he didn't think he would get caught. but he pretended to have an intellectual disability. I believe he was on the basketball team. They did really well. He medaled. They took pictures of them when they medaled. He went back home and people said, I know that guy. He doesn't have an intellectual disability. It broke this whole thing, and the whole classification was banned from the Paralympics, I believe for several years. I believe they just brought it back in 2012 in London, was the first time they brought back the intellectual disability classification. So now there is a classification. Angel City, we right now typically don't serve athletes with intellectual disabilities. Is that correct, Clayton? I mean, we won't turn them away, but that's definitely not the major population.
Yeah, I mean, we don't make a big thing about it. We don't turn them away. We have had Brianna Clark, who's won a bunch of medals. We've had her attend the games, the Industry Games, a number of times. Unbelievably fast local girl. But yeah, no, we're trying to be respectful, but sort of keep things more clear for, people that are still learning about this movement. I would expect over time that this is something that we sort of grow into and kind of lean into as an organization. I just felt early days that it was really confusing to sort of put that out.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to go. Right now, part of why, when I talked to Camille and Clayton, of why we wanted to have today is we wanted to find people who are interested in sport, who may not know about disability sport, and how can they become a coach, because that's what's going to keep making this grow. The next part of my presentation, again, I'm being safe for time, was what do we do next? And this coaching clinic is exactly what we need to do next. Is I can find people who love sports, who watch football every Sunday, who watch the Dodgers every day during the summer, and they don't realize, oh, there's baseball for the blind. I could coach that. That sounds pretty cool. So we want to educate people. So I want to take just a brief section, Camille, if we have time, for any questions just about adapted sports or the history of adapted sports or the difference between the Paralympics and the Special Olympics. You can type it in the chat. You can unmute yourself.
On intellectual disabilities, I just wanted to add that for the T20 classification, it's an IQ of 75 or lower. And there is an international organization for athletes with intellectual disabilities that are elite. That would be, it was called ENIS, it is now called Virtus. And they have a classification for high performance II athletes, and they have included high performing Down syndrome athletes as well.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Rich. I didn't know the exact numbers, but that is a good point. So for those athletes who are participating in the Paralympics, it's not like the Special Olympics. Only the top 3 are going to medal, and they are elite athletes, elite competition. So it is a different model, different mindset.
I have a question. I wonder if you maybe can, so back when I was involved in the Olympic whole movement stuff, is it still true to this day? I'm not sure, that's what I'm asking, that the actual spinal cord injury athlete is a very small percentage of the total delegation of the U.S.? Is that still true? That the person that's in the wheelchair, the typical spinal cord athlete, that they're actually a small percentage of the entire delegation. Is that still true as far as the numbers?
I don't know the current numbers to know. I believe you're asking amputee versus spinal cord injury.
Right, because that was during my process. That was the most eye-opening as I went to the Pan Am Games, Olympics, and so forth. That the spinal cord injury, I'm talking of all sports, decreased, and by the time we got to the world stage, I'd be looking around, I was being surrounded more by amputees, the little people. I don't know the right word, but I was surrounded by them more, and there's only a small percent. Somebody threw out a number that at the time, and this was 10 years ago, whatever, but they said we were only 1/3 of the total delegation of the U.S. So I just was wondering if that's true or not, if that still holds up true.
I'm not sure the breakdown. If I had to guess right now, I know wheelchair and amputee are definitely going to be the bigger portion of them. And Clayton might know some of this breakdown obviously with Ezra. I know blind is a smaller portion. There's less classifications for the blind for sure, but I'm not even sure about dwarfism and their participation. So I don't know. Clayton, do you know any of the breakdown?
I don't know it, but I think, Anthony's observations also align with probably my sort of just, kind of gut, just watching, parade of athletes and sort of, watching the Paralympic Games and stuff. I think you're probably right that it does feel like a smaller percentage of the community than it probably is at the development level, right?
Yeah. And then I had one question from Brenda. Do you need a coach's license to work or coach with the Paralympics? You don't. And that is the best question to lead into our next segment, because this whole thing is just about, we're looking for people who just want to coach, right? I can teach you how to work with somebody who's blind, just like many of these other coaches are going to teach you how to work with somebody in a wheelchair and some of the specifics to that. But we can't teach people to be coaches. Well, let me say it. We can't teach people to have the passion to be a coach, right? You have to have that on your own. We can teach you the adapted part. That is the best part. So you don't have to be certified. But our goal with Angel City in the future is to build out a program where we could say, hey, these people have been trained by Angel City. They've attended these. Here's their education credits. And so that's a program we're looking to build out. So on that note, I believe we're going to go to some breakout rooms and really be able to dive a little bit deeper into specific disabilities and sports.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. And I see there's a few extra questions in the chat. We'll have some time at the end of this session to kind of wrap up, and anyone who wants to have a longer discussion, welcome to stay on past one, but love to get kind of a little bit more sports specific. So Josh, if you could pull that image up again. Yes. As I mentioned earlier, we offer a majority of the Summer Paralympic sports and some recreational sports, but today we've highlighted 12 that we have some great coaches here who can speak more about each subject more specifically. So if you could please rename yourself to which sport you'd love to learn more about. I will insert everyone into breakout rooms and we'll spend about 25 minutes. It's just a discussion, kind of learning the basics of the sport, how it differentiates para versus non-para, and, kind of asking questions on how we can improve.
Yes, and while Camille's doing the breakout rooms, Sarah, do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your questions so I can kind of see if I can help you out?
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, so a lot of times when I go in to have meetings, or we're going in to have meetings with regard to getting gym space or how to partner with the local Parks and Rec department so that we can do some community education and things like that, there is a lot of confusion around the Special Olympics versus Paralympics and adaptive athletics. And so we obviously have a lot of education and talking going on around that during these conversations. But how do we, because we're bringing something that's new, right? Like we're bringing a new program to the table. So from an administrative perspective, we're looking at, cost, risk, benefits, all of that. And so I'm kind of thinking, how is it even possible, like, to align a little bit with the Special Olympics to not be like the same program? I don't know how to ask this question. Not to be the same program, but to almost piggyback on what they're already doing in some areas with the Special Olympics. So it's not like this shocker of a brand new program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Okay.
I've actually, part of what I've talked with Clayton and Camille is my aspirations for Angel City. There's a lot of things about the Special Olympics model that have not been brought to the Paralympic athletes and Paralympic sports.
Okay.
For example, one of the things I love is they certify their coaches. You get certified as a Special Olympics coach. That is big for a couple reasons. One, you make sure they have the right safe training. Two, you make sure they're teaching what you want them to teach. And three, it makes them invested, right? I have the title, I'm a certified Special Olympics coach. I'm invested, right? And the coaches are what make the programs go. And then we love the model of, again, they have local groups, which build up to bigger groups, which build up to bigger groups, all the way up to I believe each state has a Special Olympics. If not, there's a region. One of my former classmates in my master's program, she is running Special Olympics in North Carolina, and that is her passion, and she loves it. So I think there's aspects that we can take. but I can't say I'm surprised at all that when you have conversations with a local YMCA or somebody there just about getting the court space for wheelchair basketball, that they associate you with the Special Olympics and they don't know the difference. And that, again, it's a big hurdle. Again, most people don't know. It was Clayton was talking in our previous session. He mentioned the 3 hurdles, right? So
Josh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I do want to space into those breakout rooms, and we'll have questions and stuff at the end. So if you haven't had a chance to rename yourself, please do so now. Otherwise, about 25 minutes to chat. And sport directors, if you can, please record your conversation. There should be an option for you to do that. So here we go.
There we go. Golden. We're great. We're recording. All right. So I'm Eric Baker. I coaching by profession. I coach able-bodied water polo, able-bodied swimming. I have a master's degree in sports psychology, and I've been coaching wheelchair track and field for about 6 or 7 years now. I started out in Northern California, and I've just recently started working with Angel City. If you guys have been to the games before, I've coached the wheelchair track clinics for about the past, I think, every year but the first year. So I know a lot. I used to race for University of Arizona and kind of threw around a little bit, but that wasn't really my specialty. But I got to know it, you know, considerably, teaching my athletes how to do it. So that's a little bit about me. Welcome, Deb. If you feel comfortable, feel free to unmute and turn your video on, because we'd like to kind of all be able to see all the peers that are kind of working in our field, get to know each other a little bit. Yeah, short recap for you, Deb. Yeah, so about me. Yeah, started working with Angel City. Been coaching wheelchair track for 4 or 5 years now. I also coach water polo and swimming professionally.
My nephew's on the water polo team at UCLA.
Oh, well, your nephew is a very talented athlete. That's a really hard team to get on.
It's
yeah. So let's just go through and kind of introduce each of ourselves and get to know each other a little bit, and then we can go into a little bit more specific. So, Catherine, you want to start, and we can just go down. Catherine, Sarah,
Okay.
then Deb.
Yep. So my name's Catherine Edwards, and I coach artistic swimming. I live in British Columbia, Canada, and heard about this workshop through BC Wheelchair Sports. And I started a program about 3 or 4 years ago called Wheel Kids. And it's basically a fundamental movement skills program, which is what physical literacy is sort of my specialty in my work. And so I created this physical literacy fundamental movement skills program for kids with locomotor disability. So one thing they have to be able to do is to be able to manipulate a manual wheelchair. And so we have all the kids in chairs, and we play games and do a whole pile of different things in our wheelchairs to develop our skills and be able to level a playing field, which is a great quote. The year before COVID hit, we were able to enter, our kids range between 5 and 12 years old. So we entered, finally got permission to enter the elementary school track and field meet for the district in Nanaimo Ladysmith. And this past spring was supposed to be our year to, we entered in wheelchair racing. And then this past year was supposed to be starting with seated throws. And of course that went sideways. But eventually, once we're able to have our track and field meet again, that's the direction we're headed. So this is something that I'm very interested in learning more about, is seated throws.
That's awesome. I love that you guys are focusing primarily on physical literacy, because that's such an important life skill beyond sports. Just being able to move your body where you want your body to go. and being comfortable in that aspect. That's such an important thing, and to use sports as an avenue for that is awesome. Sarah, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm a swimmer myself. I started para swimming, but got into master swimming a few years ago, just because it was more available practice times and things like that. And there's a lot of master swimmers that also do triathlons. So when it's not indoor pool season, it's triathlon season. And I'm, although we have some master swimmers that do have disabilities, I think I'm the only one on our team that is grown up disabled. So I've kind of had to help people like figure out how their body works again after injury or whatever. So yeah, I kind of got thrown into coaching or assistant coaching, if you want to call it that.
That's awesome. So you're trying to learn a little bit about like the triathlon side of track and field, or?
Yeah, probably, or even just the track part. Because everybody goes, like, they say to me, like, you're a para athlete. What do you know about this sport? I'm like, nothing. But if it's attached to swimming in some fashion, I know more. But yeah, I've been asked if I knew anything about, para golf, and I'm like, nope, go find somebody else. So yeah, I figured track and field would be a good complement for the swimming, because there's a lot of people that, if they're not swimming, they're running, or they're on a track, or if they're not on a track, they're in a pool.
That's awesome. Yeah, they do complement each other quite well. That's for sure. Especially in wheelchair track, it kind of works the opposite side of the shoulder that all us track coaches kind of are constantly yelling at our athletes to not get all front and heavy and front rounded shoulders that you don't want.
Yeah, let's not get into the shoulders. I had a shoulder injury last year, and it's still bothering me.
Same. I feel you. Ex-water polo player here. I'm practically Nemo. All right. What about you, Deb? Short introduction.
So I am a triathlon coach. I specialize in bringing women into the sport. I've gotten a couple grants from Ironman to bring beginners into the sport. And recently, last year, I'm the only certified para triathlon coach in Los Angeles. And so USAT and myself, our plan is to build a para program, both with veterans and any other type of challenge athletes. But I don't limit myself to just triathlon, because I feel like if I'm an endurance coach, if I'm teaching you to do a triathlon, I'm teaching you how to run a marathon, a half marathon, a 10K, teaching you to swim in the ocean, in a lake, in a pool, and cycle. And like my goal next year with whomever would like to join me is I will cycle from San Francisco to Los Angeles for pancreatic cancer, because my father just passed away from it. So anybody is welcome. But yeah, my plan is to really build a program here in Los Angeles.
That's awesome. That's quite like I love your philosophy, and also that's a heck of a ride. It's gonna be beautiful going down to 101, the PCH, but that's a heck of a ride.
Next November, come on, everybody. And my nephew is he's up at UBC working on his master's. My mom's in Vancouver, so we love Canada.
Awesome. Yeah, so I figured, because this is kind of like the intro, so we're not going to get super deep on stuff, but I figured we kind of just talk a little bit about like some of the introduction stuff, and we can talk, track and field. So I don't know, are you guys familiar with the equipment used in wheelchair track and field?
A little bit.
A little bit.
The track part.
So I'm typing notes as you speak.
All right. So I just Google searched wheelchair track and field, and we'll just kind of I'll just point some stuff out, and then hopefully if you guys have questions, feel free to just interrupt me, jump in, and we can talk about it. because I am definitely cool. Can you guys see? What are you guys looking at?
Multiple pictures of wheelchair athletes on the track.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
I have two monitors set up, so I'm like always terrified of like sharing the wrong one.
That's what I do too. So.
Yeah. All right. So we can just easily bring up this. Hey, this is okay. Funny. This is actually my athlete right here. This is Sean. He was the first wheelchair track athlete that we got to compete in the Central Valley for his high school. But so, can you guys see my cursor? My finger? Yeah. Okay. So you guys are familiar with the types of gloves they use on the track. The two different types of gloves. So there's the soft gloves and the hard gloves. The soft gloves are a little bit more comfortable than the hard gloves, but they're a little bit harder to get used to. So the soft gloves, it's a full hand wrap with hard leather on the outside that you actually strap your hand into a fist. So you can't drop it, you can't let it go. But they're harder to get used to because you now have to learn to control your chair without the use of your fingers or your grip. But they do help you go faster and longer. And once you get used to them, they're actually far more comfortable than pushing it with an open hand. The other type is called a hard glove, which is actually made out of plastic, which is formed to the athlete's hand. Those are far less comfortable because you're just punching the metal push rim with a piece of plastic on your fingers. But they're easier to get used to because they're molded to your hand and they make a little bit more sense. You grab the thing, you stick your fingers in the thing, and you go. But regardless of the type of glove, the push motion is still the same. Like for wheelchair triathletes, a lot of them tend to go with the hard gloves simply because the transition's faster. You don't have to put on gloves and strap your hand in, and you can take your hand out of it real quick and take a drink of water or whatever you're doing on a long run. But there is the back side of it is that you have if you're not thinking, you could drop it or it could break, where the soft glove isn't going to break and you're not going to drop it. And then going even a little bit further, so we have the two types of steering up here. So this top bar is essentially like on a bike, like the handlebars. For the triathletes and people that aren't going to be on the track, this is what you will use exclusively. This bottom steering is for like you, Catherine, if you're going to be on the track. That's what you use to steer on the track. I'm sure. Are you familiar with that?
Not too much. We had access to these types of chairs in our practice. We had some people come from the mainland bringing chairs with them, but when we actually had our own competition, we were using like a wheelchair basketball type chair, and we had some kids in power chairs as well.
Okay. Yeah. So these chairs are pretty specialized. They're very different than like a wheelchair basketball chair or an everyday chair. The main thing is it's where that physical literacy comes into play, because you have to teach them to push differently. Because you only want to see where Sean's hands are on this push rim, right here. You only want to that his first push, where he starts his push, is going to be where his hands are there, and it's going to drive straight down.
Right.
Whereas like in a normal everyday chair, you probably grab it back here and push it around and let go right about here.
Yeah. Okay.
And the racing chair, you're going to start there, and you're going to actually push in this direction, down and flick, and then your hands are going to cycle all the way back up. So it's a very different way to think about propelling the chair. And that's the thing that when I'm working, because my athletes for my track team, we range from age rise from 5 to 21. So when I'm working with the younger kids, that's one of the first things I instill. Even when they're in their everyday chairs and they're not in a racing chair,
yeah,
I call it like fast push or racing push. And I have them like really focus on leaning forward and pushing on the front of their wheel to kind of get the idea of like, oh, when you're racing, you're not going to reach back and grab the back of your wheel. Because with these gloves, you can't do that. There's no starting from the back coming forward. It's straight down. It's really hard to get over for a lot of people that, especially with like with people that have been born with their like disabilities, to get over that muscle memory that they have. Yeah. So like, that's the idea with the actual idea of pushing and where to start, kind of getting these kids like or adults familiar with these chairs. And then once you get into the chair and they get used to pushing, then I think in a later class when we're a little bit more advanced and further along talking about racing techniques, we can talk about the compensator, because the compensator is essentially makes turns for you when you're on the track, but it's the big barrier as far as it comes with wheelchair racing. It's really it's pretty frustrating for some people. All right. Yeah, and then there's two ways to sit in these chairs. So you can have your feet on the foot plate like Sean does, or as you see like with this athlete and this athlete and this athlete. Oh, that's the kid that actually beat Sean. That he's racing for my alma mater down in Arizona right now. They're kneeling, so there's that metal plate and their feet are on that. I would say starting out, the only kids that you should have kneeling, or people that you should have kneeling, it comes down to sensation, because kneeling is pretty uncomfortable if they can feel their legs or feel pain in their legs. So I always start people out with a seated footrest, just because it's a little bit more comfortable, and you want people to have fun. Not everyone's out here to, as you all know, and not everyone's out to win gold medals and win first place at an Ironman. We just want people out running, having fun, doing endurance stuff, and the easiest way to keep that going is have them comfortable when they're doing what they're doing. That's like a little bit of the basics of like the wheelchair track chair. But when it comes down to like the track events, track is one of the cool sports where we compete in every event with able-bodied athletes. So we compete from the 100 up to the marathon. We don't miss an event. For kids in California, we're actually able to compete alongside our able-bodied counterparts in the same events at the same time. There's just a couple of specifications of you have to keep one empty lane on either side of the wheelchair athlete from the able-bodied counterpart. That's really the only difference in that respect. Are there any questions so far? No? All right. We can talk about seated throws real quick. That's a really tiny picture. Let's see if we can find a bigger one. Why are these so small? maybe. Bigger picture? No, even smaller. Great. Um, yeah, so real quick, seated throws, like the chair you're sitting on, and you have to make sure to block out their legs. So you're gonna want to strap down across their knees or something to kind of give them leverage to swing off of. And then depending how strong their core is, they're gonna want a pole or something to hold on to with their offhand, because you don't want a kid with a weak core to kind of get stuck falling backwards. But besides that, all the techniques and stuff are pretty much the same as a able-bodied throw. The extension, you can't really block the hips, but the extension and release are pretty much identical to an able-bodied throw. For safety standpoints, make sure you got to strap this chair down, because as they get stronger, they can kind of flip and fly out. This is quick, guys. I know we kind of talked a lot about like the beginning and stuff, that like the equipment and stuff that goes along with it. Were there anything else like you guys would want to learn more about, technique wise and stuff, or like, because we're gonna have more of these and we can be more specific with it. This was just like the basic overview.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. I can see Natalie. I know we have two other people, and I can't see names. So let me just fix this. Okay. Miguel and Joy, right? And Natalie, I see. Okay, great. You guys can unmute yourselves if you want, so we can just sort of have a free-flowing conversation. I have some information to share, and then definitely want to leave some opportunity for you guys to ask questions, or also contribute any information about areas of sitting volleyball in Southern California or in the country that we don't cover, that we're not aware of. So let me introduce myself. So my name is Lori Okimura. I am currently a board member of Angel City Sports, and the area that attracted me to the board and also is my area of interest is volleyball. Regarding sitting volleyball, so sitting volleyball, for those who has anyone had any experience yet with sitting volleyball, or seen it, or heard anything about it? Or yes, Natalie, you have you seen it? Have you heard about it, or have you had a chance to play?
I played in the Angel City games last summer.
Oh, good. Okay, so I probably saw you on the court there. Great. How about Miguel? Have you ever seen or played or tried to coach or play sitting volleyball?
No, I haven't. I'm fairly new.
Okay, great. And Joy, how about yourself?
I went to a sitting volleyball clinic hosted by Angel City last year.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so one of the things about sitting volleyball in particular, so sitting volleyball and a new discipline called beach para volleyball are the two disciplines of volleyball that fall under the Paralympic umbrella that Josh was, kind of explaining earlier. But one of the things that I always like to start with people, and it was something that I learned very early on in my experience with sitting volleyball, is that sitting volleyball, unless you are trying to actually play on the national team, in the Paralympic Games, you actually don't have to have a disability, whether it's a mental disability or physical disability, to play. So what some of the trends that I'm seeing is, obviously when we recruit for the national team programs, there are some, you've heard the words classification, requirements, or some requirements of disability or categorization. But in terms of starting a sitting volleyball program, and a lot of the people that I find with Angel City that become involved either in the games or in the sort of regularly scheduled clinics, they actually have no disability. So there's USA Volleyball actually runs a division of their US Open Championships that now, for 3 years now, has been dedicated to sitting volleyball teams. And while there are a handful of athletes who are either on the current national team for sitting volleyball or were previously Paralympians, the majority of the participants are like friends and family of those people. And the teams are comprised of what would be classified as an able-bodied or non-disability athlete. So one of the good things, about the sport right now is that you can play at any level, right? And it's as fun for kids as it is for adults, and even adults that kind of skew a little bit older, right? So like, oh, really, I don't have to jump, I don't have to run, I can just sit down and, and play. And that's actually another, sort of benefit for people to try, is that they feel, okay, well, I'm not a really good jumper, I can't jump very high, but you don't need to have those same skill sets. Now, does that mean that sitting volleyball is any easier than regular volleyball? No. And once you get a chance to try it or see it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. There are different body movements. In fact, tomorrow we're having a free sitting volleyball clinic with a gal named Bethany Zumo, who was one of the gold medalists from our Paralympic team in Rio. And Bethany, she really does a good job of sort of like breaking down what you should be feeling when you're going through the action, because now everything is virtual. She has to be a bit more descriptive. But there are a lot of different body movements or body positions. But when it comes right down to it, there are very few differences really in coaching or instructing. It's all volleyball, right? If you know anything about volleyball, then you can certainly, get up to speed. I mean, the rules are slightly different. The field of play is slightly different. It's smaller. Obviously, the net is lower. Think of it in terms of a normal volleyball net height, 7'4" for women, 8 feet for men. It's like tennis height, for sitting volleyball. There's some other, like I said, some of the rules differ, but to be quite honest, if you have a passion for the game, and you do have a desire to learn how to coach, it's actually quite a smooth transition, to add sitting volleyball or even beach para volleyball to your coaching curriculum, right, to your coaching experience. A couple of other things just to start us off, the opportunity. So the parasport and non-parasport, like I said, I think sitting volleyball is probably one of the most transitional. You find that in sitting volleyball, at least at the recreational and the kind of amateur level, that there are, again, quite a few, the diversity. There are quite a few athletes that are adaptive, and there are athletes that are not, right? And they function just perfectly together, on a team. A lot of the tenets of coaching are the same. The teamwork, the strategy, the sort of rules of the game on a very basic level, and then there's the rules of the game that are specific, obviously, to sitting volleyball, just like it is to beach and just like it is to indoor. Some of the differences, we've covered. I mean, the equipment, it's the same ball. It's actually the same net, just at a different height. Some of the rules of the game are different. The field of play is different. It's smaller than an average. It's more closely aligned to like the size of a badminton court, or a little bit smaller in stature. What does that mean for us? There was a question that someone had about facilities. What it actually means for volleyball or sitting volleyball is that we're able to use a lot of what you would call non-conventional, facilities. So you think about, I mean, if any of you are coaching right now and you're trying to get space at your gym, whether it's a high school gym or a community center or a college, right? I mean, the struggle is real, right? So there's not a lot of time allocated. You're sharing with basketball or wrestling or something else. Now, for sitting volleyball, to give you an example, it is kind of packaged in a really convenient way, so that, just an example, is at our World Championships prior to the Rio Olympics, and then again prior to these Tokyo Paralympics that that hopefully we'll still have a chance to play. The venue and the court was actually assembled in a theater hall in The Hague. So it was this like massive concert. You imagine like going to watch an opera or going to watch a concert or something, and instead of seeing the performers on stage, you're seeing sitting volleyball, right? Which is pretty remarkable. They've been held in museums, they've been held in outdoor spaces. So the convenience, if you will, of finding a place to play, don't limit yourself as coaches to thinking, oh, if I don't have a regular court or gym available, I can't do that clinic, or I can't do something else. We've even put sitting volleyball demonstrations outside by laying, whether it's a sport court or some artificial, tile. Really the one kind of differentiating thing is you need to have a surface that you can easily slide on. So, playing on the grass might be a little hard, like it'd be like a crabgrass kind of thing. But if you can put down sport court tiles on top of the grass, or even we did one on top of a parking lot, then you have a venue. So as coaches, don't limit yourselves to thinking that if you don't have a traditional venue, don't have a traditional facility, then that means that you can't, you can't do your demo or have your practice or, anything else. Tennis courts, same thing. Sometimes they'll put a surface or some kind of more like giving cover, they can slide. But also, we can also put sitting volleyball in a traditional venue as well, right? We have lots of options. In terms of where one big difference, I think, and where the athletes come from. So while some of you may be coaching, and maybe you start coaching with youth sports or recreational, some of you may be coaching in high school, college, professionally. One of the differences, when in those situations, you may see an athlete that comes from a young age and sort of the trajectory is, they keep getting involved, and as the skill level increases, the groups get, a little smaller, right? Fewer people participate at the college level, fewer people go on to professional or national team. And sitting volleyball, it's what I've noticed, and this was something that I wasn't aware of when I first got involved, and I happened to start noticing and asking questions. A lot of the athletes are going to be, at least at the elite level and the Paralympic level, are older. They skew a bit older, whereas like on our current women's national team, the average age is around 27 or 28. On our women's sitting team, or actually our men's sitting team is a better example. We have an athlete who is rounding the corner of 50, and there are a lot of other teams like Peru has a gentleman who's 73. Right, he's like a national hero. He's played para sports, every para sport that they offer, in Peru. But sitting volleyball, as he describes it, is really forgiving on his body, And while he is a lifelong volleyball player, he used to play. His amputation came through an accident, So there was a big portion of his life that he played standing volleyball, regular, play at the park volleyball. And then after his accident, he began to try different parasports as a means of rehabilitation, physical rehabilitation. And that's something that you'll find a lot with some of the participants at the more advanced level, and even with the national team level, is a lot of those athletes come from the military. They're disabled veterans. They come from organizations like Wounded Warrior or from the U.S. Veteran Services, VA hospitals, where they have patients who are trying to find activities to regain flexibility and strength and motor skills. And so you'll have a lot of identified participants or athletes that may come from that slightly older crowd, of participants. But you also have a lot of kids, and some of the clinics that we've done. I know a couple of you mentioned that you had already participated, in Angel City clinics. Some of the clinics that we've done, we've seen children who just need the socialization, right? They're not in any sort of rehabilitative process. They just, a lot of the parents that we welcome into the community at Angel City, their parents that like Clayton and Bahar might have seen them even standing on the street corner, with their kids. And then they walk up to them and say, hey, does your kid like to play baseball or basketball, or have they ever tried volleyball? So we get a lot of kids, younger people, at these clinics who just didn't think that they could participate, right? So that's something as coaches that, you draw on that nurturing quality already, right? But in this sense, when you're introducing sitting volleyball to new players, whether they're, 5 years old or 7 years old or 15 or 50, right? You really do have to put that nurturing quality in the forefront, because in some cases, this may be an activity that, they may not have had any knowledge of it before, but the people who come are coming because they didn't think that it was available to them, right? They were in a position where they didn't believe that, that they would be able to participate, right? And that's pretty powerful thing, as coaches, like when you see somebody doing something right after you've been telling them your whole, training session, like, okay, this is how you take an approach, and this is how you swing for the ball. And then they finally do it. There's like that sense of satisfaction, right? And that's even like tenfold, when it comes to dealing, with adaptive athletes and athletes who are trying an adaptive sport for the first time, right? Okay, so one more thing, and then I'll open it up to some Q&A before we get back to the general session, is now is a really good time in terms of opportunities available. Actually, the opportunity right now is that this is sort of a new area for sport and coaching. So folks like yourselves who are, taking part in a clinic like this, or other clinics that you may, that you may also be a part of, you're sort of on the front end, right? You're on the kind of on the cutting edge of creating more opportunities for sitting volleyball. Right now, the opportunities that are most widely publicized are at somewhat the higher end level, the Paralympic aspirational level, right? The national teams in the United States actually have a training center, and they train in Oklahoma City. But there is a lot of beach and indoor sitting volleyball, beach para and indoor sitting on the East Coast in Florida and on the West Coast in California. San Diego has a program, or a club program, a sitting volleyball club that's aligned with the adaptive sport program at San Diego State University. And in fact, one of our national team assistant coaches, a guy named John Aharoni, he's very involved, down there. So in terms of, I think this is your first step, right? Get together. And this is one of the reasons why I joined Angel City Sports, is because I saw, they did a free clinic in sitting volleyball, and I happened to be traveling with the women's national team and men's national team coming back from a qualifier in China. And somebody told me about this clinic. And so I stopped in, and there were like 100 people, and probably only 5 had ever had anything to do with volleyball, right? But yet there was so much interest, and there was so much, opportunity that sparked my interest in, okay, if Angel City can pull this off, right, and get this many people here, and you guys know, if you've coached volleyball, like, you're hard pressed to get people to, to come to practice, much less clinics or educational, continuing education opportunities. But Angel City has the means, they have the method, they have relationships with adaptive sport programs in the United States at colleges and universities. And now we also have a relationship with our national governing body and the Paralympic Games, not to mention the games that are coming in 2028. So now is the perfect time, for all of you, in this breakout, to get involved, because you can actually be on the forefront of the sitting volleyball movement, and volleyball and beach volleyball are already 2 of the most popular sports in the Olympic program, and sitting volleyball as of Rio has become one of the most popular sports, next to like track and field, adaptive, track and field. So having said all that, a couple of things as far as next steps. There are some organizations that I'd love to point you toward, including our own. But World Para Volley is the international federation for adaptive volleyball. I'm part of the leadership of World Para Volley. I focus mostly on beach para volley, because that's a discipline that we're trying to bring to the LA Paralympics. So I'll be reaching out to some of you guys to help out with that. But World Para Volley, they are the kind of overriding authority in sitting volleyball, which is currently the only Paralympic discipline in World Para Volley, and beach para volley, which is in the schedule to being proposed for inclusion in the 2028 games. World Para Volley has a regional affiliate called Para Volley Pan America. You hear about the Pan American Games and the Parapan Games for disabled athletes. That basically ranges North, Central, and South America. So that's our zone, if you will. And the people at Para Volley Pan America, they also offer a lot of, sometimes they're not specific coaching, coaching curriculum, but there are opportunities for coaches, including sometimes travel, to other locations to help train or identify or provide oftentimes some charitable, opportunities, free clinics and such. Here in the United States, we're the only federation that is not subsidized by the government yet. And so in a lot of other countries, the government has like social welfare programs, and they're always looking for coaches and individuals who want to help, and whether it's coaching their coaches or being coached by their coaches. So those 2 organizations, World Para Volley and Para Volley Pan America, if you're really interested in getting some more opportunities and sharing, a bit more, networking a bit more with coaches that are in the same position that you're in, in terms of sitting volleyball and beach para volleyball, those are 2 organizations that can really help you out. So we have a couple minutes. Camille's giving me some flashing reminders. We have a couple minutes, so I'd love to open it up if you all have any questions or need more information about something. And then obviously my information is available through Angel City Sports, and I think they connect us all. So we can certainly continue the conversation, well past this first clinic. But how about if I just open it up and see if and actually what I'd love to do too, which I should have done at the beginning, is hear a little bit about your own experiences. Maybe you can introduce yourself real quick and let me know where you're coaching now or what type of coaching that you're involved in. I'll let anybody start. Anybody who wants to open up your mic.
Yeah, I can get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Aston. I'm currently a college volleyball player. Well, not currently because our season was canceled, but it's okay. Yeah, but I know Camille through my sister, so she's been getting me involved in Angel City and just sharing your guys' message. And I've been a huge fan ever since my first sitting volleyball experience last summer. So I'm just looking for ways to get involved in it as well.
Perfect. Next. Joy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So similar to Natalie, I'm a second-year undergrad student at UCLA. Played volleyball since I was 12. And then I got into Angel City Sports last year, and I've been in contact with Camille too, and she notified me about the clinics. I loved it there. And my main focus, I guess, is to like inspire younger athletes.
Great, great. Miguel, you're next on my list of faces.
My name is Miguel. I'm from LA. I work for Department of Recreation and Parks.
Awesome.
I volunteered 2 years ago at Angels games as a volunteer, and I was trying to get to the gym and watch the sitting volleyball. We have a big program here at my rec center for volleyball, and I just wanted to include and our city is actually looking into adaptive sports as well, because of the Olympics that are coming to LA. So I just wanted to kind of just branch out a little bit and kind of get ahead of the curve and provide some for community if there's a need.
Miguel, that's amazing because
information on.
Yeah, Miguel, that's amazing because in your position and in your position and with the information coming about Los Angeles and the 2028 Paralympic Games, there are $16 million a year that's being allocated by the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee for youth targeted sports, right? And about a little over $1 million of that is going to be dedicated for adaptive sport. I mean, I wish it was a bigger percentage, but in terms of how that money is going to be allocated, it's through the Parks and Rec system, and through organizations like LA 84 and, and all that. So I think you're getting ahead of it is right on point, and I'm hoping that you can, do more with Angel City, all of you. But I'm hoping that you can do more with Angel City to bring maybe a program to your location, because I think that will help you, in moving forward. Okay, and I think we have one more, and then we'll go back to the main. So Aaron Beck, is your dad Robert Beck by any chance? Oh, I see that she's in our chat room. Okay. So she's in our chat room. So I'll get us back to the main session, but please feel free to keep in touch, and we'll definitely reach out. Right now, we do have a sitting volleyball program, but we desperately need people to be involved in it in terms of like being like the captains of the program. So if any or all of you, are interested in sort of coming along with us on that journey, we definitely would welcome the opportunity to do that. Okay, and then I'll just kick us back to the main session. Thanks, everybody.
I missed it. So I'm happy to be here. Camille asked me to talk a little bit just about, and Andrea, I know you have a lot of experience, right?
Yes.
Yes. So, really what I'm here to talk about is kind of really what it looks like right now today. What the landscape is today. And I can speak more to what the landscape is in California, but I can also speak to a little bit about just the issues and kind of the barriers that we face, but also how to get into coaching, because that is one of the things that we have the least amount of. As I stated previously, I really got into this as a player. And it was funny because when I got in as a player, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm just going to be really good. I'm just going to be really good at this. And I'm going to work so hard. And I thought, yes, I can do this. And when I got out on the court, it was a totally different situation and a learning experience. And living with multiple sclerosis and still having the ability to be to function in my movement, I don't use an everyday wheelchair. So it was different for me to go and use a wheelchair for basketball, but I wasn't able to play non-disabled basketball because of my health. So I so enjoyed playing, but I quickly realized that I'm not as great at playing as I would like to be. And so I kind of shifted a little bit more into becoming more of like a cheerleader on the team. And I really enjoyed that role. And that role kind of morphed into, we had some changes on our team and morphed into them asking me if I wanted to coach. And I think that one of the most basic things for the LA Shield Maidens, which is the team that I coach and that I've been an administrator for 7 years. Well, coaching only for 3, but playing and with them for 7. So I kind of lost my train of thought, which does also happen with my multiple sclerosis. So being with them for this amount of time, and I moved into this coaching position, and I have had continuous conversations with the women on our team. I am not the best coach, right? With regard to what is happening. I understand the game of basketball, wheelchair basketball. I understand plays, the players, the logistics of it, but not as well as other coaches understand that. And I think that as a coach and for the players, what they say is, what you bring to the table is that you listen to us, you're open-minded, we talk through plays, we talk through attitude, we talk through conflict. And so what I lack in maybe some of those areas that are more the just the higher level, I guess, specifics of it, I have in this other area that they really appreciate. And so I always tell people who want to coach, you don't have to be the best coach in the world and know every single thing right away, but you have to be willing to learn the fundamentals, to learn the aspects of the game, and to also have these other pieces of yourself where you have that empathy and that understanding. And I think trust is really big. My players really trust that when we have a conversation and we talk about something, that I'm being as candid as I can. I'm able to pull them out of some headspaces that they get into because of the relationship that I've built with them. And so to me, that's a lot of the coaching. And I have a great team and great assistant coaches that are able to also help fill in the blanks. But there is a huge need in at least women's wheelchair basketball for coaches. And Andrea, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, I actually serve on the board for the NWBA.
Okay,
and
awesome.
One of the things that we're working on developing is a coaching certification and tools to help those who are interested in coaching and those who are already coaches to provide resources and tools for them so that they know how to work with youth, women, men, and where they would start developing those particular skills. So it's not just looking at the physical component, but looking at the mental, the cognitive, the psychological components, as well as the development of a player, of an athlete. And so we have a set of tools that we're launching out to everyone so that they can start beginning to answer some of those questions that you all have, and hopefully developing more expertise in coaching.
I love that.
Yes.
And I really feel like more individuals will want to coach with because they'll understand that structure and they'll feel more empowered to be able to coach. Because I know for me, when I took that assessment, I'm the hardest on myself. So I don't want to disappoint our players. I don't want to disappoint myself. I don't want to disappoint, I just don't want to disappoint. But I also have a little bit of a fiery attitude, which which everybody kind of helps with. And I think they were talking about, that self-control needle. That's one thing that I'm looking at, because I have a tendency to react immediately to something I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve type of thing. And so that's something that as a coach, I also have a lot of areas to work on. So I think that with this coach's certification and with those tools, we'll feel a little bit more empowered to, to really kind of own what we're doing and to not have imposter syndrome and to feel stronger and more effective too.
Right.
Anne, have you played? Have you coached? Are you?
Yeah, so I have played many sports through my life growing up, and actually became a youth basketball coach when my son was 4. He wanted to play with the Y, and they needed a coach, and so I started coaching basketball, and I love coaching and teaching and helping youth. And so 8 years later, I've been a volunteer coach the whole time, working through the Y or our local rec center. I've coached 250 boys or more. My husband and I actually coach together. Interestingly, we're a really good team. We have different skill sets that complement each other. And so, I've spent the last 8 years exactly what you're saying, right? I want to be better for them. Right? When they're in kindergarten, it's a different skill set than when they're in 2nd grade, than when they're in 4th grade, than when they're in middle school. And so I started learning everything I possibly could, anywhere I could, because I needed to be ahead of where they were. Otherwise, I couldn't help them. So I actually was part of the USA Basketball's first coaching license program. So there were about 175 of us who went to this conference, and I got licensed through USA Basketball. And, all of the things we've been talking about today, it's the same themes that I've been hearing all of these different clinics in a good reinforcing way. So I also have MS. And so my, yes, we can do it. Woo! So it is. It's like a terrible club you don't want to be part of, but you're like supported when you're part of it.
Still in it. You're like, yes. All right, I'll own it.
So I have increasing mobility disability. So I'm able to be out there on the court with my teammates, but I can't run with them, scrimmage, but I can. So I have the coaching part of it. So actually, what I wanted to do is, one, I want to play again, right? So I wanted to get into doing wheelchair basketball. And then I also want to learn, so I live in Portland, and we actually have great programs. So through our Y, they host wheelchair basketball competitions right in the same gym where we have all the other, tournaments going on. Our Y, same thing, both, physical disability and mental disability teams playing right there, right next, in the courts. We're all kind of interspersed there. And what I wanted to learn too is, these are amazing athletes, right? And we accomplish so much with, all of these additional challenges. And so, when I have my teams who have their full abilities, right? I want to help them understand, there's so many tools that you're using when you have a disability that should be applied all the way across, right? My team doesn't need to rely on their legs to be a good shooter. I mean, look here are some amazing athletes who shoot better than you do, and it's because they know this different skill, right? And so how do we share the skill sets that we're learning, how we're training in different ways, right? I mean, I think there's a set beyond all of the other things we've been talking about, kind of that emotional awareness, the motivation, kind of, how we're approaching the game mentally. Also, how do we share across, physically, whether we have challenges or not, how we're doing things. So, and then I also want to start with wheelchair basketball myself so I can show my teams as well, whether I'm coaching wheelchair basketball team or my full ability teams, right? Here I am and I have a challenge and I'm going to get in it and I'm going to struggle and I'm going to learn and we're going to, I'm finding a way around it. So it's, yeah, and of course I had this epiphany and then COVID hit and I can't get started in anything. So this was sort of my first, I've been seeing the teams several years as I've been doing this, but this year I was like, okay, I'm going to do something for me too. It's going to help everything. And how do I get started? So this was actually the very first, I reached out to our adaptive sports group and they said, well, unfortunately we aren't doing anything till January. And so this was my first step in. So I need to learn how to get started and I want to participate and I want to learn and I want to share and all of those things. So
good for you.
Yeah.
I
My
want
first
to touch
suggestion.
on, go ahead, Andrea.
I was just going to say my first suggestion would be to make sure that you're logged in or a member of the NWBA. So that way you can collect resources from us, connect with local teams in your area. So that way you'll be able to, because a lot of teams, some teams have already started practicing.
Have they?
Preparing in hopes of being able to have a season.
Yes.
Because we're trying to possibly push the dates back further.
I saw that.
Yeah, so find out who your local teams are, get connected with the NWBA. Like I said, we'll have a lot of resources out there available. Get in contact with, I think, Challenge Athletes Foundation. We're connecting with them and Nike to try and increase girls and women involved in wheelchair basketball.
They also have a grant right now, so
Yes.
you could apply for a grant. And I think it's open through November 15th or the end of November maybe, but check it out at Challenged Athletes Foundation's grant.
Actually, I don't think it starts until November. I think they pushed it back.
Oh,
I know that,
okay.
yeah, because we're doing a Zoom with Nike, and they want to be able to push their grant at that particular time.
Oh, cool. Okay, good. That's awesome.
I hope so.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. So anyway, you could get equipment and you could get a chair through them and get started that way too, which would be great. I want to touch on what I really like that, Anne, that you said that I actually, so my day job is I own my own business. It's called Eye Level Communications, and it's disability, E&I, training, consulting, and speaking. And one of the things we've been talking about is shared experiences, right? And how do we kind of highlight shared experiences across COVID, across Black Lives Matter, across the issues that are now at play, healthcare. And so when you brought up the shared experience almost in reverse, right, of really highlighting athletes, adaptive athletes, and their abilities with doing less with more in a way, I guess, is best way I can say it, but those shared experiences of the athlete, regardless of physicality. I love that. I hadn't thought about it in terms of athletics. So thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what we're doing, right? We're finding ways we are doing more with less, right? I mean, when we're having to find ways and we're so strong, right? And so highlighting that, and then helping others realize that it is mental, right? We take for granted the things we are able to do when we don't have a disability, and we think sometimes less of our capabilities if we're not at the level we want to be. And so we just have to realize, how strong we are, how much capability we have. And, when you're young, you don't know that. I mean, part of when you get a disability is there's a realization of where you really are in the big scheme of things. So when you're young, you just think everything's possible. And then you learn over time how to, to find that inner strength, which is something that's a different skill, right?
And consistently adapting and being able to adapt to those changes is a completely different mindset. And I liked, celebrating kind of, I don't remember who was talking. I have a lot of notes, but one of them was talking about the mindset and the praise.
Yes, the growth mindset.
Yeah, the growth mindset. And I think that really, using that scientist analogy and reinforcing that growth mindset and be intense and positive in the same way and all of that. It was, I think that with adaptive athletics, the one thing that I'm really trying to figure out with the Special Olympics also is really how to define that for people and help to educate people. And it's sometimes hard, I think, in the sphere with the intellectual developmental disability piece, because we do have that one piece in the Paralympic side. So that I find to be a little bit hard to explain. And that prompted my question of how can we kind of align with that to not ask for something that's completely different. Because, and just so you know, one of the things that we struggle with here in California, and Andrea, you can speak to North Carolina, but in California, we really struggle with finding gyms and spaces to have practices, and where can we hold tournaments. Finding funding is very difficult. And I think that if we had more coaches, if we kind of go back to those three needs, knowledge, programming, and participation, if we had coaches who are trained to understand how we go into gym spaces and talk about utilizing that gym space, and how can we work with, how do we understand if we have to have insurance to go into that gym space, and different things like that requires a bit more training than just walking into some place and saying, hey, can I come in and play basketball for 2 hours? And really forming those partnerships. So I think that's really kind of what we're looking at here, but that's a barrier. And I think with education, we can improve upon that. We have a lot of programming, I believe, but one thing that I would like us to see in California, we only have one women's team, but we have a lot of men's teams, but no one's really working together on the programming. And I think that if we could collaborate a little bit more in California, we probably could progress the adaptive athletics agenda or whatnot forward. And then participation, sometimes it's hard to find women who want to play sports like that, right, Andrea?
Yes, completely.
What?
Well, I think it's the responsibilities of the female, all together.
Yeah, that's true.
The work, the family life. I know that's one of the things that took me out of the sport, was family life. And I just didn't have the time that I needed to be able to train the way I needed to train in order to be effective in the sport and enjoy the sport the way that I know I can enjoy it. And, with women, like I said, a lot of it is just the responsibilities that they have that are set upon themselves, or they set upon themselves, that forces them out. And then the funding is another huge component, because the sport does cost.
It's expensive.
It is
Right?
expensive.
Yeah.
If you're fortunate enough to get a grant, which CAF does apply a lot of grants.
Yeah.
They
Apply a
do.
lot of grants. But it's just, can you get a wheelchair? Once you get a wheelchair, are you going to be able to use the wheelchair? Because are you close enough to a program that's going to help you use that wheelchair? Or do you have a mentor that can help train you or get used to the wheelchair? And then, the gym part is just, it's horrendous, trying to find gym space. And then once you can find gym space, then it always comes down to liability, insurance, and damaging the floor.
Damaging the floor is
It's huge. It is huge. And so creating partnerships with Parks and Rec, to where, there was a program that did it not too long ago.
I want to know.
Oh, what was it? I just lost my thought.
I do the same thing. Don't worry.
Oh, it was actually my program.
I do that.
But they create, you come in and you get a membership. So if you allow us to use your gym, we will definitely have a membership and train at your facility. And so that creates that partnership with the athletes to be able to come in and use the weight room, the pool, whatever they need. And then at the same time, they're providing gym space for that team. So we made a partnership like that in my team for Virginia, out of Virginia.
Okay. Is the NWBA looking at any like support with regard to providing some of that structure information for
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you all for participating, and I hope you learned something. Does anyone want to share something they discussed that they thought was impactful, or maybe just a learning anyone had for any newbies?
Hey, Camille, it's Lori from
Hey,
Sitting
Lori.
Volleyball chat room. Hey, so I just wanted to include, first of all, I'm in love with my whole group and I've recruited them for everything we do, Sitting Volleyball, moving on in the future. So I've already warned them about that. But one of the things that in our sport of volleyball that I noticed that maybe is similar or maybe it's different from any of the others is I reminded our folks that oftentimes in Sitting Volleyball, you will get participants that have not tried volleyball before, which if they're coaching volleyball right now, or any sport, usually you get some sort of like progression, right? They start as kids or escalate through the, college programs or national teams, or even to the professional or the or Paralympic level. But just wanted to, remind our coaches that sometimes you'll get somebody who's interested in trying, who's never tried that sport before, or any adaptive sport. And so that nurturing part of you as a coach, right, that sort of communication part of you as a coach becomes increasingly more important, because I describe it like one of the first sitting volleyball clinics that I went to with Angel City. I think it was the first. And I remember Clayton and Bahar telling the stories about how they would see people with their kids and be, hey, does your son play baseball, or has your daughter ever played wheelchair basketball, or would you like to try volleyball? And so oftentimes those first participants in our clinics, it's like the first chance that they are being given and they didn't realize that there was something for them, right? And some opportunity for them to try. So just to rely on your instinctive, kind of nurturing ability as coaches to help bring them, into the fold, right? Because we'll get older athletes, like our national team athletes in sitting volleyball skew a bit older than for sitting volleyball than they do for beach volleyball or volleyball. Right. And sometimes it's 15 years older, but because there's opportunities that are extended, in the adaptive sport world, especially at the Paralympic level, and age no longer becomes a factor, in some cases. So just wanted to share that with the group.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. Sarah, did you have your hand up or? No. Okay. Well, we'll end right on time then. If anyone wants to stay on with additional questions, happy to hang on. But thank you all so much for being here. I want to really emphasize that this is the beginning of something Angel City is building really seriously. This wasn't just a 3-hour afternoon for us. We want to really cultivate a tribe of coaches and help grow this in California and nationally and even globally. I know there's a few of you from outside the US. So please stay in contact with us. I hope you're able to connect with each other. There will be a post-event survey where we will ask if you're comfortable with having your contact info shared, just so we can all keep the momentum going and hopefully build this thing. Clayton, any final words before we drop off and enjoy the rest of the day?
No, I always have something I'll just, pull out of the air, but just so grateful for you, Camille, and your leadership and the rest of the Angel City team and the partners pulling this together. Is really, I feel like I learned how to be a better parent. Those of you that know me, I have 3 kids. So like, this is really, really just good, like parental advice. But what I always come back to, and those of you that know me, have heard this before, probably too many times, but I think our real job is to create a sense of belonging for this community. And I think we learned a lot today, and probably it just reinforced a lot of the things that many of you already were doing in your lives and with athletes. But, you know, people that understand that don't think that that is a secondary goal, that can understand that that really is the beginning. We want to keep attracting more people like that. And I look around the room and there's so many beautiful stories and faces here. But Sarah, when you shared your story, the word that popped for me was you felt like you found a community that accepted you where you belonged. And I know you would agree with that, sort of paraphrasing of your story, right? So this is how this thing grows, right? And so the risks, I always say the risks of a bad coach or a bad experience are so massive to me, because if we turn one little kid away or piss off the parents or whatever happens because something wasn't right, they're gone forever, right? There aren't that many programs out there. There aren't that many places for them to connect and learn. In fact, if they tried to go to another program, they'd run into the same damn people because it's so small, right? The community, we all do everything, you know? And so the risks to me are so massive for getting that belonging piece wrong. And I hope you can see how hard we work to do that. But I think this is the beginning of creating this sort of, right, this sort of really high expectations of ourselves across the movement where we can really start growing, right? Put some gas on this fire and let's go. Because we have the foundation already built, you know, and now let's frame the house and start going. So just thank you all for your time today. I'm sorry I just cut into our on-time exit of this meeting. But I'm really pumped. I mean, there's going to be a lot more coaches, resources, trainings. You know, we're gonna really lean into this, knowing that most of our peers are really small programs around and maybe don't have the muscle. So, you know, Lori's helping us on Safe Sport, leveraging her connections and experience at USA Volleyball. So there's a lot more coming. I think it's really exciting. And Sarah, when you talk about pitching Rec and Parks, to be able to say, this is where we're at, right? From a Safe Sport standpoint and how we train and certify coaches. We do things at this level. I'm not saying it's going to open doors that don't want to be open, but it will give them a sense of peace that we have our shit together, right? You know, that we're really tight. We're professional. We've got this. There's no liability risks by partnering with us to let us in the door. And so I just think there's so many cool benefits to sort of putting this all together. So that's me.
Thanks, Clayton. No, and thank you all again for being here. Thanks to Positive Coaching Alliance, Headset Sports, Josh and Wayfinder Family Services. Look out for follow-up and have a great day, everybody.